Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. This is our 20th bonus show, and my name is Henry. This time, we are going to be talking about Martin Scorsese, the legendary director. He has a new film coming out, Killers of the Flower Moon, in fall, winter time. And so I figured, let's do a recap of his most recent string of films. A couple of these might be retreads, or we did them a long time ago, or, we did them just touched on them briefly, but I wanted to just go ahead and have them all in this one place, and especially for anyone who might be new to him, give you his most recent string of films. So, and going in order here, we're going to be talking about Shutter Island, Hugo, The Wolf of Wall Street, Silence, and The Irishman. He also had a Bob Dylan documentary, but we're going to be kind of maybe saving that for something more specific, maybe a music documentary or something like that, a show. But for now, we're just sticking to his dramatic, narrative films. So it should be a great time. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you got this through our Bandcamp page, thank you very much for the donation. And hey, even if you got through the regular feed, you can still go to our Bandcamp page at thefilmbuds.bandcamp.com and download it there for just a $1 donation. It goes to help support the show and just helps us know that there are people out there who, really, really enjoy it. So yeah, well, now Martin Scorsese, once again, he is a legendary director, one of the best of all time. He made big waves with movies like Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Mean Streets, Goodfellas, King of Comedy. And he's also gone on to do, Casino, Departed, Cape Fear, Aviator, the list goes on and on and on. And, I can't remember the first one I saw of his. Maybe it was The Departed, maybe Shutter Island, maybe was The Departed, maybe Shutter Island, probably was one of those. But I love him. He is, iconic. He has such an incredible style, especially his work with crime films and the crime genre and gangster movies and all that is. Nobody can touch him, really, in my opinion. He's left such a legacy with that. And he's also gone on to do, as we'll get into, a lot of other films that have nothing to do with that, and shows his variety of storytelling and interests and passions. And so, yeah, very excited to talk about it and very looking forward to his new movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. So let's jump in. Let's get to Shutter Island, which this one, since these are all standalone, I will be just doing a IMDb plot synopsis so you can have a little refresher, and then I'll be doing the normal box office stuff. So, Shutter Island came out in 2010 and stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Emily Mortimer, Mark Ruffalo, Ben Kingsley, Mox von Sydow, Michelle Williams, and others. And the synopsis is Teddy Daniels and Chuck Owell, two U.S. Marshals, sorry if I butchered that last name, are sent to an asylum on a remote island in order to investigate the disappearance of a patient, where Teddy uncovers a shocking truth about the place. So this one made $294 million against a budget of $80 million. So, pretty good success. Scorsese's always had a, fairly decent box office draw for the most part. This one is considered to be one of his recent best films. I would agree. It's also one of Leonardo DiCaprio's best performances. In my opinion, I think it is very much like a horror film in some ways, this mental asylum. It's got mystery, it's got drama, the calls back to World War II and the Holocaust is very effective. It's really intense, really unsettling, great score. It looks incredible, as all Scorsese movies do. And obviously the big twist at the end where, DiCaprio's, it's discovered that he has fabricated this whole story on his own. He was a patient there, and, it ends with him, saying better to live this way or to die, an honorable man. And, it's a very powerful ending. And obviously the lighthouse on the island is a very iconic part of the movie. And God knows what happens in there, and all the dark, weird, abandoned places that he explores, all that stuff is just amazing. It's very dramatic movie, and it's definitely one of my favorites just of all time, really, but one of my favorite Leo and my favorite Scorsese films for sure. It's got great twists, and I think everything with Michelle Williams is very impressive. There is that one big moment where she's lost her mind and he runs out into the lake and finds his kids, and that scream he has, is so powerful and, heartbreaking. And that's a big moment of the movie. And so, yeah, it's filled with memorable moments. I love it. Never really gets old. We'll always happily rewatch it because there's always something new to find. Or definitely check it out if you have not yet. Big fan. It would be a heavy 5 for me. 5 out of 5. All right. Well, let's move on to Hugo. And this one came out in 2011, just 1 year later. And stars Ben Kingsley, Sacha Baron Cohen, Asa Butterfield, Chloe Grace Moretz, Ray Winstone, Emily Mortimer again, Jude Law. And the synopsis is, in 1931 Paris, an orphan living in the walls of a train station gets wrapped up in a mystery involving his late father and an automaton. Also produced by Johnny Depp, fun fact. This one made $185 million against a budget of around $160. So not a box office success, kind of a rarity for Scorsese. And it's rare he has this big a budget, so maybe that had to do something with it. But it was based on a novel. This wasn't some original story or part of a franchise or anything like that. It's just, a standalone movie, as all these movies are. And this is also his first and only kids movie. It's very almost Spielbergian in nature. Very heartwarming, very warm, very very childlike, very endearing and sweet. It doesn't have much real violence or brutality in it. It is emotionally affecting and dark and sad sometimes, but not in the way that Shutter Island is, or The Irishman or something. This is really a great example of how someone like Scorsese, who's known for doing dark, brutal, violent, gangster crime movies, can go do the sweetest movie that you could imagine. And in a way, it reminds me of Spielberg in that way as well. I think, the whole cast is awesome. It's very funny. That's something that Scorsese can do really well. His movies are typically very funny when it is warranted. And Asa Butterfield, this was his big break. He's great. Jude Law for the time that he's in it. Sacha Baron Cohen as the officer. Everybody really is fantastic. The score by Howard Shore is fantastic, who did Lord of the Rings. It's an amazing score. It looks, you can see the budget on screen. The colors, the effects, just the lush, vivid cinematography and set design, all that looks beautiful and never really gets old. And once again, there's always new stuff to discover. So it's definitely one of my favorites. Honestly, this recent string of his films are some of my favorites. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I actually prefer a lot of his newer films as opposed to his older ones. Maybe that's because of rewatchability or something like that. I don't know. But I love Shutter Island, and Hugo is, in my opinion, very, very underrated and is a great movie for really anyone. I think anyone would enjoy it. If you haven't seen any Scorsese movies, this would be an interesting one to start with. But either way, a must watch, in my opinion, across the board. That one is 5 as well. Going to be probably pretty repetitive in that way, but it's a 5, heavy 5. Seen it 3 or 4 times now and love it every single time. All right, let's get to The Wolf of Wall Street. So this one came out in 2013 and stars Leonardo DiCaprio, once again, Margot Robbie, Jonah Hill, Matthew McConaughey, Kyle Chandler, Rob Reiner, John Bernthal, Jon Favreau, and many, many others. And the synopsis is based on the true story of Jordan Belfort, from his rise to a wealthy stockbroker living the high life to his fall involving crime, corruption, and the federal government. This one was based on a memoir, and the screenplay was by Terrence Winter, who also created the show Boardwalk Empire on HBO. And, just showing the difference of his style of filmmaking. He can go from doing Shutter Island to horror, dark, drama, thriller, to doing a kids movie, to doing this very exploitation kind of over the top, very graphic, biopic, if that's what you want to call it. And, it is about this true story about a guy who got it huge on Wall Street, made a crazy amount of money, went crazy with it, did drugs, spent money like crazy. And it's about his rise and fall and the corruption of Wall Street and how easy he was able to manipulate people, get all this money, lose it at the same time, get the feds involved, and still kind of get away with not as much punishment as you would expect. This one, Scorsese is known for doing these big epic movies. It's 3 hours long, but to me, I've seen it 4 or 5 times. It does not feel that long. There are occasional points where maybe it drags a little or is maybe a little long, but I think for a 3-hour movie, it's so funny. It's, definitely one of the best comedies of the 2010s for sure. DiCaprio, one of his best as well. Whenever he works with Scorsese, you're going to get one of his best performances. This is where Margot Robbie got her break. I remember seeing her in the theater and saying she's like this. She was new, obviously, and like I was like, I could just tell from her performance where she's amazing, and I could tell like this actress is going places, and she did. But the whole cast is fantastic. Jonah Hill is amazing. His teeth, just he's so funny in it. It does, once again, it presents these ideas of corruption, wealth, and just how the wealthy can take over and how they can manipulate people and get away scot-free a lot of the time compared to others who are not. But even if you didn't want to go into all that, it's just a funny, wild ride, like the scenes where they're doing drugs, even though it's kind of horrifying. At the same time, there's a level of comedy. Scenes like the yacht scene out in the ocean where they have to be rescued. Just the crazy parties and, parades and all that stuff. And now I read the book. I don't know how much of that is actually true. But in the context of the movie, very funny, very entertaining. Leonardo DiCaprio's just over the top speeches are fantastic, and it's very well written, very well written. Great soundtrack as always. Scorsese is known for having a great soundtrack, similar to someone like Tarantino. It's a very iconic kind of style of soundtrack. Very good one here. And now obviously, there's a controversy with the movie with people saying, this is kind of like fetishizing this kind of behavior and all that, which I can understand in some ways. I think at the end of the day, it is just it's a satire. It's social commentary. It's a warning in some ways. And now obviously there are plenty of people who may watch it who may completely, that will go over their heads and they would say, oh, this movie was so fun. They did this crazy thing, and they won't even be paying attention to the messages of it, which, sure, that's an issue. You could say it is. But for me, watching it on my own, thinking about it, I don't have that issue. I think it's very complex and has a lot to say. And so it is a classic for me. And it's also another favorite of mine. It's in my top 100 on Letterboxd of all time. That one is at 5 as well. 3 5s in a row. Probably one of the first times doing a bonus show where that was the case. But this is another 5. All right. So fourth one. Let's get to Silence, which came out in 2016. And this once again shows you his just amazing variety of storytelling. This is a heavy, epic, dramatic, religious piece. He can just go from one thing, from one genre to another, to another, to another, and he never seems to miss a beat. Similar to someone like Spielberg, he can just do whatever. He's a storyteller and he can tell like any story. So, plot synopsis. So, in the 17th century, 2 Portuguese Jesuit priests travel to Japan in an attempt to locate their mentor, who is rumored to have committed apostasy and to propagate Catholicism. And stars Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver, Liam Neeson in a pretty underrated role, in my opinion. And those are the main, I guess, the big stars. And this one made $23 million against a budget of around 45. So not a success really financially, but not a huge budget, so not a big loss. Very well received for the most part, but just not really a crowd pleaser movie. But this was a passion project for Scorsese. He'd been trying to get made for decades, and it is based off a novel, a very famous novel of the same name. I will say this might be a big hot take. This is probably my favorite Scorsese movie of all time. I'm not a religious person myself. I was raised Christian, but I consider myself to be agnostic now and have been for many, many years. I still find parts of religion interesting, of religious history, bread, the cultural impact. I find that very fascinating in a lot of ways. And this movie is by no means a Christian friendly, faith friendly kind of movie. It's just telling a story in the world of religion. It's very grounded, and of course, as is factually true, during this time, Christians in Japan were being, prosecuted, and they had to hide away. It was a very scary time for anyone who was that or who tried to spread the word of Christianity in any form. And so it is dealing with, these 2 priests coming over there, being in a land completely unknown to them, having to survive and trust complete strangers, and also having to spread the word of people who are also Christian. And I find this movie fascinating. I find it so unique. It's so uniquely told. It's such a unique story. How Scorsese tells it is, beautiful and so dramatic. So to me, very compelling. Some people may find this movie very boring. It's not a flashy movie. There's no action. There's no soundtrack, but this is the kind of movie I love. A deep, historical epic, very character-based, very idea-based. Andrew Garfield, Adam Driver are both amazing in it. Liam Neeson is amazing. Really the whole cast across the board is very good. And to me, it's incredibly underrated. It's not one that I expect most people to enjoy, but it's one that you should at least try and watch. It's very deliberately paced. It's not, it is slow, but not really in a bad way to me. The locations are beautiful. Just the constant ideas of, someone who is faithful to, as opposed to someone who isn't faithful, or maybe who is faithful to another religion, how someone can either stay faithful, or if they're put in a certain situation, they can say, oh no, I'm not this, I'm not that, just simply to avoid death, to avoid injury or prosecution. And it shows you how some people are the commitment of people to their faith. And I think that's a fascinating idea in it. Adam Driver's and Andrew Garfield's journey is really interesting. I think when they get to Liam Neeson, it's a very cool part of the movie. The location, the conversations they have about, Liam Neeson has kind of gone away from them, and their ideas, and they're trying to convert him back and bring him back, and he doesn't want to. All that stuff is incredible. Yeah, it's just, I could talk for hours about it. I think it's once again, very, very underrated. My favorite Scorsese movie. I can say that now. And I just wish there were more movies like this that came out, because it's a very, very different, very refreshing, very compelling, dramatic film. And so if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Maybe don't. I don't know if you'll love it, but it's really worth watching. And it's one of Scorsese's most interesting and unique stories that he's told, for sure. Especially considering this was a passion project for him. All right, well, that one also a 5, heavy 5, 6 out of 5. As high as I can go. That is also on my top 100 list, pretty near the top. So, and I'll put it in the show notes, but you can follow me and you can follow Elle, my co-host, on Letterboxd at our. And I'll put, all that will be there. So please follow us there if you have not already. And thank you to people who do follow us. All right, let's get to the last movie. Let's get to The Irishman. So The Irishman came out in 2019, 3 years later. And plot synopsis is an illustration of Frank Sheeran's life, from World War II veteran to hitman for the Buffalino crime family, and his alleged assassination of his close friend, Jimmy Hoffa. This one stars Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino, Harvey Keitel, Ray Romano, Bobby Cannavale, Anna Paquin, Steve Graham, a lot of familiar faces with Scorsese, especially De Niro. Written by Steven Zaillian, who also wrote like Schindler's List, Moneyball, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Gangs of New York, and many others. A pretty legendary screenwriter, in my opinion. So this one had a limited release in theaters, but was released on Netflix. It was I guess considered a Netflix original film. It had a budget of around over $200 million. And the box office, results here are very not really confirmed, because, it did make a little money actually, but then it had high viewership and then could have made more money if it was released in theater. So I won't really give a box office result, because I don't want to speak too out of fact here. So a big thing with this movie is one big part of the budget was the de-aging of De Niro and Joe Pesci, because it tells this very big, sweeping, grand story, just as Scorsese is very known to do. It's almost 3.5 hours long, which I love. It's rare to get a movie made at that scale with this kind of storytelling, at this quality. And so that's why this movie, even if it's not perfect, is one that I'll always appreciate and always respect and always love. This is really Scorsese getting back into his gangster crime family world, which of course he's very known for. I saw this one on Netflix. I wish I could have seen it in theaters, but sadly I did not. Overall, I think the movie, like I was saying, very strong. It's not for everyone. Once again, it's almost 3.5 hours. It's not one that's gonna win people over. I feel like some people, after an hour and a half, 2 hours, couldn't make it anymore, even if it was good. I feel like, a lot of people they see the runtime, even though they can watch, 10 1-hour episodes in a row of a show, they can't watch a long movie. I'm the opposite. I want to sit down and watch all 3.5 hours of it. And, De Niro, Joe Pesci mainly are incredible in it. It tells, they goes back in time with, when they first started out and then to where they are now, very old, really in like retirement homes. And it is based off the novel I Heard You Paint Houses, because that was like the, I guess a phrase for saying I'm a hitman. Very interesting story. Nobody tells gangster stories better than Scorsese. He does it great here. The cinematography is beautiful. The effects, for the most part, work really well. I'm not a big fan of de-aging, but when it's done well, is what it is. If you can do it right, then do it. And I think they did as good a job as they could have here. It looks very convincing, and their performances really match up with the age that they're supposed to be at. Overall, I don't think it's my favorite gangster Scorsese movie. I think that would be Casino. This one is, I'll go and say 4.5 out of 5. It's the only one that I would say, not a 5 out of 5 right now. Maybe will be on rewatches. There are times where the plot gets maybe a little extended. The pacing drops a little bit. But I think by the end, I'm still loving it. A movie that you really have to see, especially if you're a Scorsese fan, you're a crime movie fan. It is just, you got to be ready for it. It's an epic. You got to make sure you got the right time and mentality to take it all in. I mean, one thing that Scorsese does really well is he presents these people, these criminals, these murderers as real people, as best he can, and shows you they go out and do these horrible things, but then they'll go back and have a family. They'll go back and have these normal night outs with friends and things like that. But then at the same time, they're going and killing people. And so it's a very, it really makes you battle with how you get attached to these characters and what you think about them, the idea of who someone is and what the idea of a criminal is, and how you judge them. All that stuff is very interesting. And, that's something that's been through all of Scorsese's movies, especially the gangster one. To end off, very good movie. Really a lot to unpack. I would really like to read the book that it was based on. But yeah, very just fantastic movie. And it's not one similar to Silence, well, really similar to all of these movies that we've been talking about. Very rare that a movie like this gets made at this scale, at this quality, with this kind of filmmaking and budget. So appreciate it while you have it. That's my opinion. Even if it's not always perfect. Who cares? So check it out for sure. And yeah. Just love Scorsese. Can't say enough about him. Could talk for hours and hours and hours. And maybe at some point down the road, we'll do another, part 2, maybe going back to his early movies, something like that. So this one be 4.5 out of 5, as I said. Heavy 4.5 out of 5. Close to a 5, just not there yet. All right. Well, I think that is about it. We'll definitely do Killers of the Flower Moon on the regular show coming up in, I think, November or December of this year. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Subscribe, rate the show, tell your friends, follow us, on social media at FilmBuds. And yeah, we really hope you like these shows. I love doing them. And even if it's just me, that's okay sometimes. And Elle's going to do some soon as well. But I just love talking movies. I hope you do too. I hope you're getting something from it. Whether it's something you've never seen these movies before, you've seen all of them, and you just want to hear more about them, or if maybe once again you're just getting introduced to all these movies and maybe you'll check them out. So yeah, well, as always, hope you enjoyed it even half as much as I did, and I'll see you next time.